Respectful of everyone's time, we'll go ahead and get started with a quick introduction. My name is Tim Hoskins. I'm the president of Quester, and give you a quick overview of Quester for those of you who do not know us. Quester is a strategy and insights company. We're located in beautiful Des Moines, Iowa, where it is currently getting ready to snow. It appears that winter has started to come early this year, so it's very frigid. But the company has been around since the 1970s. Started as a research company focused primarily on qualitative, and through the years has really transformed into one of the leaders in the strategy and insight space, working across sectors such as CPG, tech, retail, financial services, and healthcare. Today's presentation, we're going to be focusing a lot on one of our core frameworks that we have developed in collaboration with many of our clients. But just a quick background, what I mean by strategy and insight. So at Quester, we have always been an insights company since we started in the 70s. Always trying to leverage innovative, creative methodologies to capture the deeper thoughts, emotions, rationale from consumers. But today, we also are a strategy company that helps companies leverage those insights that either we create or have been created from other companies or internally to help in innovation and developing new products and services through ideation sprints. Disruptive marketing and creative messaging workshops for both brands that are emerging as well as those that are current and trying to reposition. And then finally, we do a lot of strategy and consulting around brands that may be being disrupted and are seeing a loss in sales, loss in declining membership or user base, etc., and helping companies strategize on how to win them back. But today, we want to focus our time on distinctive attributes. Distinctive attributes is something that we've been doing here at Quester for years, but always trying to make it better in terms of not only capturing both System 1, but as well as System 2, with the effort to help companies identify new ways to communicate with their consumers, whether that be through an overarching brand story or down to very specific creative elements around messaging, whether that be digital strategy or TV commercials, etc. So the overall business objectives for our distinctive attribute framework is to really understand how the brand fits within the category, identifying and deep diving into the unique attributes and benefits that your brand has at both a conscious and a subconscious level. But the ultimate goal is being able to provide you breakthrough creative that will be consumer-centric and is everything from the imagery of the brand and how things are being communicated all the way down to the words that you use in the messaging itself. And so again, we've had the opportunity to work with companies across all different categories, and many of the commercials and messaging that you see on a daily basis are as a result of our distinctive attribute framework, and we're very excited to share it with you guys in a little bit more detail. So it's really important to talk a little bit briefly about the methodology, because at Quester we have created something that allows us to get to a very different data set than other organizations. So in the early 2000s, our founder had a dream of being able to look at qualitative data with the same confidence as quantitative data. And so in order to do that with qualitative research, we needed to exponentially increase the number of interviews that are conducted for any given project. And that's where this idea of a software moderator was born. In around 2005, we launched our first version, and I can share with you that it wasn't very intelligent. Think of it as basic follow-up probing questions that were hard-coded. But as we worked with our clients at the time, and continued to do research on research, we started layering in artificial intelligence that was built off of over 5 years of data that was being collected. And today, it's an award-winning methodology, widely used, and it is a one-on-one interview. Respondents do not know it, but they're actually being asked the next question based on their previous response by an artificial intelligence moderator. And that becomes very important as we talk about our distinctive attribute framework and identifying ways in which your brand needs to communicate and message across all media channels. And so to provide a little context, I'm going to share a video with you that brings it to life so that you understand how we collect the data. And then the rest of the presentation will be around digging into the example deliverables as well as a case study.
Let's deep dive into how the artificial intelligence works. Respondents engage in what appears to be a traditional online or mobile survey, but as they type in their answers to open-ended questions, the software is analyzing every word. It processes multiple layers of intelligence in real time. Intelligence works. Respondents engage in what appears to be a traditional online or mobile survey, but as they type in their answers to open-ended questions, the software is analyzing every word. It processes multiple layers of intelligence in real time to determine unique, open-ended, follow-up probing questions. These probes are grounded in uncovering further definition, elaboration, implication, and rationale. Questor's artificial intelligence works off 3 tiers of intelligence. Prior to interviewing, Questor moderators pre-program targeted probes, language specific to your project or hypotheses, that trigger a specific follow-up question. Targeted probes help respondents take their ideas to a deeper level. One example of leveraging this intelligence would be to dive deep into drivers and barriers of ideas, concepts, and claims based on the key stimulus language. The second layer of intelligence involves redirect probes to push respondents to think beyond the easy answers. An example of this intelligence in action is our path to purchase, where we acknowledge the consumer's ideas, but push them to think beyond the surface level. The third layer of intelligence is natural language probing. Unique ideas on a per-respondent level are identified through this most sophisticated and widely used tier. The artificial intelligence probes the response by categorizing each word based on nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and then applies an algorithm that understands the proximity of each word against one another. For example, when used within unmet needs, jobs to be done, and innovation research, the unique idea is identified and pulled into the follow-up probing question to uncover deeper context. Our goal with every project is...
I'll save you guys the marketing speak. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leverage the Q&A, which should be on your panel, and type those questions. At the very end, I'll make sure that we answer any that come through. And so now that you have an understanding as to how we collect the data, I want to take you guys through a slide that talks about how we typically approach and set up the project. So it's typically a 25-minute online interview conducted by the AI-driven moderator. What we see is that in about a 30-minute interview with the AI, you get about the equivalent amount of data as if you were doing a one-on-one, in-depth, in-person interview when we compare and contrast the transcripts. Respondents are able to take it at their own pace, and it has a high degree of satisfaction even at that 25-30-minute level. Typical sample size is 200 to 500 people per group, and what we mean by that is that the groups themselves can be different quotas within brand. So some of our projects will have multiple different brands, 5 or 6, and within each brand, we're cutting the data through by maybe its age, maybe its heavy, medium, light users, any way that you would like. And that becomes incredibly important when we start to get into the analysis. But on the very back end, all of the analysis is conducted by linguists. So these are human beings. We have not created AI to do the actual analysis process, as we have found that trained linguistic analysts have a way of pulling out nuances within the data and collapsing ideas that computers and software just aren't able to do yet. And so here's the sample conversation that we would take each and every respondent through. We start off by talking about the product or the brand in their own words, what it means to them. Tell us an experience. These are all types of questions that really get them into the right mental state. And then we go to what we call a benefit ladder. The benefit ladder is to talk about the benefit of the product and what that does for them in their daily lives and ultimately how it makes them feel. And one of the things that we've done in the past year is replace that feeling question with an implicit association exercise where we're showing people images and they have to click on the image within a certain time parameter that ties to the emotion that resonates with them. Now, that entire exercise really serves as a springboard for us to get them into a different mind state. And what we see is that by the images that they click on, we then show them the correlating emotions of that image. They select one, and then we go through a more deeper conversation around why that emotion. We talk about metaphors and a number of other different questions. But here's just kind of a sample of it. Once every respondent has gone through that interview, what we're doing is then consolidating the data and looking both from a brand perspective within the quota groups within the brand, but also looking across the brands. And our linguistic analysts and our strategists work together to ultimately provide you a summary of here is how you need to communicate to these consumers or potential consumers. This is the mind model, as we call it, on the left-hand side. So the product attribute that's the most important, what's the functional benefit, the resultant benefit, and then the ultimate emotion. We also are able to do comparisons of the ideas. So perhaps you're talking about premium consumers versus value consumers, and how does that message need to incorporate different nuances. And then finally, our strategists and our linguists write potential messaging opportunities for you so that you can leverage that in working with your creative agencies. Here's an example, and now we're going to get into some more deeper dive analysis. So this is what we call our mind model or a benefit ladder. What's on the left-hand side, because we're going to send this deck out to you all later, we've included how to read it, but allow me to kind of really talk you through it. So what our team of linguistic analysts will do is that they will consolidate all of the data and start to do linguistic coding for all the product attributes, all the functional benefits, the resultant benefits, and the emotional benefits. So the percentages that you're seeing here are actually quantified qualitative insights. We then lay these out in a map, and we know that consumers don't always think in this linear fashion, but it's really important for us to actually display it in this linear fashion because that becomes the crux of how we develop the messaging opportunities. So in this very specific example, the most popular ladder here is this idea of thoughtful ingredients, adding healthy elements which are good for the child and make them be a good parent. Now, within our analyses, please keep in mind that dependent upon the project and dependent upon what we also see when comparing and contrasting across the quota groups as well as the different competitive brands, the most popular ladder might not be the thing that we put forth. In fact, the most popular ladder might be the positioning statements that you guys have today. The whole idea is to be able to identify those opportunities by overlaying those models against one another and then following the paths. So Once we have identified the right messaging opportunity, and also it might be a couple of them for you to evaluate, we then take all of the verbatims and the respondents who had that mind model, and it can be hundreds, and we start to unpack that mind model so that we can understand when we're building very specific messaging and positioning, what are the things that we need to include from a very key and differentiating language. So this is stat testing on qualitative data to show you within the ladder that I just shared, these are the types of words that we need to use within that messaging. And by using these words, what we're going to be able to do is build that consumer-centric message that resonates with consumers at a higher rate. The next thing that we dig into is the emotional deep dive. The emotional deep dive becomes very important when we're trying to understand sometimes the most, not necessarily the most popular path, but maybe the path that articulates the strongest emotional appeal. And so by digging into the emotions through a very specific type of analysis, combining the System 1 implicit association results as well as the linguistic analysis, we're able to dig into each one of these. This starts to become very important when we start thinking about the imagery that needs to play a part in the overall creative creative deliverable. So when we are working with companies, it's not just about saying, here's your positioning, here's the messaging, but also how do you need to communicate that with imagery? How do you need to communicate that through situations, if it's a TV commercial or if it's a print ad, a digital ad, etc. What is that imagery that'll really resonate with people? And this specific section is very valuable for that. We have a lot of experience in linguistic analysis at an emotional level because it's very important to not just understand the emotions that people are saying, but the full context behind that emotion. And so as you read some of these verbatims here, our team will really start to build out, it's not just the motion, but here's all the contextual elements of that that are crucial. Happy doesn't always mean happy. We know that. The implicit association allows us to get to a deeper articulation of an emotion, but that contextual piece adds all of the extra information to really build out that creative opportunity for you. And then finally, one of the areas that we're always including on our distinctive attribute framework is the metaphor topic. Again, this provides color and inspiration, which becomes very crucial when working with the creative agency and developing the brief so that they can have an understanding of this experience has a very similar experience to this, or this is how they talk about it in a very different way. A lot of the creative agencies that we work with our clients really are able to take the mind model, take the messaging, positioning, the emotion, and this metaphor to develop very unique commercials that they weren't able to in the past. So it really provides a blueprint or a playbook of not only how you need to message, who you need to message to, but also differentiate amongst your competitors. And so finally, we want to make sure that we share case studies with every single one of these frameworks that we're sharing with you. So we had a client, a Fortune 100 client that ultimately had a positioning statement that was very product-centric, and they had been using it for 9 years with very positive ROI. What had happened, though, is that in the past 2 to 3 years, they started to see their competitors make that same exact product-centric claim and incorporating it into all of their advertising. So even though the actual ROI of the current campaign was still positive, they know that they needed to start to separate themselves. They had conducted mind modeling for other brands historically, using a more traditional method where they were interviewing consumers face to face, taking through them a deep, immersive, qualitative interview that was 90 minutes to 2 hours long. But they went with us because they needed to really understand not just the mind model of their brand, but all of the competitive brands as well. And so we were able to do 3,800 distinctive attribute interviews across 6 different brands and overlay these brands on top of one another to show them a very unique and distinctive path that existed for them, but also existed at a very small level across some competitive brands as well. This reinforced the area of opportunity for them to potentially steal share. And so, what were the business results? After we shared with them, here is the exact positioning, here is how you need to incorporate this positioning into your creative, whether that be print or television, etc. We showed them imagery. We talked to them about how they needed to set up the scene and leverage some of the assets that they had been using on the previous campaign to carry it over. We worked with the creative agency. The campaign was rolled out across all media platforms, in-store displays, as well as they were able to take advantage of a college football bowl game sponsorship. It's been the best performing ad in the brand's history, and they went from $1.75 TV ROI to $2.05 in the very first quarter of launch, which was not expected. In fact, they had prepared the entire teams, both internally, that they would probably see a dip in slightly in that TV ROI, but to see that drastic increase was phenomenal for them. When we talked to the client the other day, they are still seeing very, very positive results, both from a sales perspective as well as brand measurement through their tracking. And they've actually agreed, if you're going to any of the Quirks conferences in 2020, to speak with us. So this client will be unveiled at that point in time. So with that being said, that is our distinctive attribute framework. And again, it's being used across all different types of industries. We have a number of these case studies that speak to the success. And what our clients really love about it is again, it's a very different approach in terms of being able to conduct qualitative, integrate implicit association, but to conduct quantified linguistic analysis on the back end to point them in the right direction. But once pointed in the right direction, still lean back to that valuable qualitative data and unpack it to be very specific about the language that should be used to execute. So we're going to continue to do these webinars. We wrapped up last time the Reverse Jobs to be Done webinar. Our next one will probably be on lapsed buyer and attrition, maybe segmentation. We're really letting our clients and potential clients and people who attend these give us the feedback of what do you want to hear next. And with all of them, our promise is to deliver a case study so that we can share ultimately the business impact. So with that being said, I'm a big believer in saving about 15 minutes, 10 minutes for any questions that you might have, and then more importantly, letting everyone out 15 minutes early to get to their next meeting. So does anyone have any questions at this time? So one of the questions, just in case anyone's typing and thinking of one of the questions that we often get relates to our methodology, and that is, how often is that AI probing actually being leveraged within any given interview? And what we can share with you, and again, this is on our research of the data, is that most 80 to 90% of the actual follow-up questions are from the AI, where it's identifying the natural language of the respondent, identifying what they are saying, the key idea, and then pulling that into the follow-up question. Another question that often comes up with distinctive attributes is, do we have to use the implicit association? And the answer is no. It does add a little bit of cost, not much. It's only about $5,000 per project. We believe that it delivers a lot of value, but we do have clients who are leveraging the distinctive attribute framework without. And keep in mind, this can be done on a product, service, brand, both emerging brands as well as current brands that need to be repositioned. And Questor is absolutely happy to work with creative agencies and our clients to help not only deliver the results, but work in developing that creative strategy. Okay. So one of the questions is, do the sample sizes always have to be as big as they were in this case study? That's a great question. No, they don't. This specific study, the brand really wanted to dig into heavy, medium, and light consumers within every single. Our recommendation is that if we think about a brand, and if you wanted to do cuts within a brand, our recommendation is a minimal sample size within each one of those cuts or subquotas of 100 to 150 respondents. That's where we feel really comfortable about being able to do that quantified linguistic analysis. But we do run this project consistently, where it's 150 to 200 people per brand with no additional data cuts. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I think that everybody would love to have some time back in their day, and I'll answer one more. So we have a question: do we have any research about the respondent experience and how engaged they are in the interview? That's a great question. Thank you. The answer is that we consistently add a final question to the interview across all of our studies, and it's measuring satisfaction with the interview itself, both in terms of the content, but both in terms of the experience with the moderator. And the industry average that we've pulled from the GRIT report on a global level is a little less than 50%. What we are seeing is a 77% satisfaction rating, and that is regardless of whether it's a 10 to 15 minute interview or a 25 to 30 minute interview. Now, we're very skilled in being able to know, based on the number of questions, how long the typical answer or the interview length would be. But please keep in mind that consumers, sometimes if it's a 25-minute interview, they can be highly engaged and be online with us for 35 to 40 minutes. We do have very specific ways that we have built into the moderator so that they can identify unengaged respondents. So if somebody is talking gibberish, just typing random letters, we'll escalate that and follow up with a probe that says, hey, we might not be communicating well. And we ask that question again. If they do it again and again, we actually boot them and terminate them from the interview, thank them for their time. And we reform the actual panel provider that we work with. The other thing that we are doing, obviously, is through the linguistic analysis. That's another layer of data cleaning and quality, because we are looking at every transcript to make sure that people are talking on topic, and we're incorporating an engaged interview into the overall analysis. Another question that came in: is the metaphor topic part of the benefit ladder or implicit association exercise? The benefit ladder itself does include the implicit association exercise. That's how we can get to that top layer of emotion. The metaphor topic, think of that as a separate analysis outside of the benefit ladder itself. But what we can do is we can identify the benefit ladders that go on a very specific path. We can then correlate all of those people who talked about that benefit ladder and look at their metaphor topic in isolation so that we can provide you a very specific analysis on that. And it appears that we do have a chat. So how effective is the AI methodology with a B2B decision maker audience where the subject matter is more complex? We actually have a lot of experience in that. B2B, both in financial services with financial advisors. We've done this exercise with medical professionals, as well as leaders within companies. And it's very effective because with this specific framework and across all of our frameworks, we can add in various dictionaries that are very specific to the actual industry and the topic that we're talking about. And again, because the moderator was built not to necessarily look at any single individual word, but all of the words used in context with one another, it allows us to take up any topic, regardless if somebody's using very specific vernacular that is tailored to your industry. Thank you guys for all of these great questions. I can share that one of my favorite projects was a financial services client that was talking about a very complex product that they were ultimately offering for financial advisors. And one of the things that we do when talking to a B2B decision maker is we almost tailor the moderator and the way we ask the questions such that we put them in the driver's seat as if they're educating us, as if they are the thought leader. So we'll add in questions based on your expertise and your experience. We'd really like to understand this, right? If you were giving advice or describing this product to somebody else, how would you sell it? How would you talk about it? Right? Those are all different types of ways in which we tailor the AI methodology for that B2B decision maker. Well, excellent. I have not seen any more questions come in. Once again, greatly appreciate everyone's time for taking part in this. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to have a conversation with us about any of the frameworks that we've listed here, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Quester. We're big on bring us your biggest challenge. We understand that you have a lot of different options to choose from, methods, partners, etc. But we would love to take on that big challenge for your organization. And again, we'll continue to do these webinars on a pretty consistent basis. And at one point, I think that we've got a few clients who actually want to join us in more of a roundtable discussion on the future of the insights industry. So thank you again for your time, and have a great rest of the week, and everyone gets 25 minutes back in their day. Take care.